We discussed how to end the war in Gaza.
After the declaration of an imminent end to the Gaza war, and more, according to President Trump.
And let's call it eternal peace in the Middle East.
A declaration of diplomatic victory from Benjamin Netanyahu, insisting he had got the upper hand in last-gasp negotiations.
Instead of Hamas isolating us, we turned things around and isolated Hamas. Now the whole world, including the Arab world and the Muslim world, are putting pressure on Hamas to accept the conditions we set together with President Trump to release all of our hostages, both the living and the dead. When the IDF remains in most of the Strip, who would believe that?
The 20-point plan blurs some of the Israeli Prime Minister's supposed red lines. The involvement of the Palestinian Authority in running Gaza is postponed until it's been reformed. Before that, a technocratic administration reporting to a so-called Board of Peace headed by President Trump. And as for Palestinian statehood, to which Netanyahu remains implacably opposed, it talks only of the possibility of conditions for a pathway at some undetermined point in the future.
Prime Minister, there's a question being asked. Did you agree to a Palestinian state?
Absolutely not. It is not written in the agreement either. We said we would resist in force a Palestinian state.
The plan envisages a phased Israeli troop withdrawal with little in the way of timelines. The exception is the first move back in advance of the hostage release to come within 72 hours of the initial agreement. Israel would still control the majority of the territory. The second withdrawal would happen when an international stabilization force of Arab and Muslim countries would be in place, with the capacity to ensure Hamas was disarmed. Israel would still control more than a third of Gaza. A final withdrawal to what is termed a security buffer zone would be based on standards, milestones and timeframes linked to demilitarization. In Israel, where opposition parties and most hostage families have been pushing for an end to the war, there is broad support.
Great day for Israel. I don't see anyone from right to left who's going to go against it. The only question is now if Hamas will approve.
I think we've done it way too late, with far too many deaths on both sides, our soldiers, our hostages and the Gazan people. But I think it's a great move.
One key question, though, the response of Netanyahu's far-right coalition partners. Days ago, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich was talking of a settlement real estate bonanza in Gaza City. Today, he's not rejecting the plan, but calls it a resounding diplomatic failure, a closing of eyes and turning our backs on all the lessons of October the 7th. Our children will be forced to fight in Gaza again. This morning it was Palestinian children in Gaza continuing to suffer. 17 people reported shot and killed while seeking aid in the centre of the Strip. But alongside the continuing misery, some fragile optimism now, tempered by how often hopes have been dashed when previous ceasefires were seemingly close.
We must accept, because of what we are going through. There is no escape for us after this. Trump expects us to refuse so he can destroy what remains of Gaza. We don't want to give Trump and Netanyahu any excuse.
All night my children asked me, will we wake up to a ceasefire in the morning? We woke up to find my cousin martyred, along with his children and his wife. His wife was 7 months pregnant. We didn't wake up to a truce, but to more calamities.
Hamas has said it will consider the plan in good faith, but it contains provisions that in the past it has rejected outright. Among them, the movement's complete and verifiable disarmament, a commitment necessary for its leaders to receive amnesty and free passage out of Gaza, and the continued presence of Israeli troops well after the hostages have been released, along with the leverage they represent for Hamas. One significant gain for Hamas, the number of life-term Palestinian prisoners who would be returned, 250, plus 1,700 people detained in the last 2 years. It is under significant external pressure. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey and Qatar among those publicly supporting the deal.
It's still too early to speak about responses, but we're truly optimistic that this plan, as we said, is a comprehensive one. The delegation is now studying it responsibly, and we are continuing to communicate with them through the meeting that will happen this evening.
The plan spells out that no one will be forced to leave Gaza. Anyone who does will be free to return, a major shift from the Trump Riviera plan of earlier this year. and one that Tony Blair, who will be on the oversight board of the new transitional authority, had insisted on. From the White House, Donald Trump said an end to Israel's campaign was beyond very close. But as it goes on in Gaza, as Hamas considers its response, there are still many ways this deal could founder. And if it does, Trump says Israel will have full US support in finishing the job. We're joined now by the former Israeli MP and the current executive director for the Regional Organization for Peace, Economics and Security, Ksenia Svetlova. Thank you very much for joining us. Benjamin Netanyahu is certainly selling this pretty hard to Israelis as a diplomatic coup. He's reversed the polarity, he says, of the pressure on Hamas and away from Israel. Is he right on that, do you think?
First of all, I have to say that, it was a given that 75% of the Israeli public that supported throughout the war, the end of the war and the release of the hostages will basically embrace this proposition. And they indeed did so. We see cautious optimism in the Israeli society. There is still a lot of unclarity about how this deal will be realized. But Benjamin Netanyahu didn't have to really try to sell hard this deal to the Israeli public. He still yet has to sell it to its own government and his own hardliners.
Is that going to be enough for people like Ben Gvir and Smotrich on the far right fringes of his coalition?
Well, we are entering an election year. Everybody knows it. Netanyahu knows it, and also his partners in his coalition, the most extreme far-right parties know that as well. It is very likely, I think, that no matter what are the real terms of the deal, they will reject it, even solely for the purpose of starting their campaigns for the upcoming elections.
Let's move on to Hamas. I mean, there's obviously massive external pressure on them. This big statement, this joint statement from Arab and Muslim countries in favor of the deal. Also potentially internal pressure. People inside Gaza well aware of what's on the table, and they'll have expectations of their Hamas leaders as well. So how likely do you think it is that Hamas might actually accept it?
Well, this is the great question, and I would rather, of course, prefer that this press conference that took place yesterday. It would take place when Hamas already confirmed their participation in this deal. But I believe that now, when all of the weight is basically on Qatar, the sponsor of Hamas and the supporter of Hamas, then it's also Qatar prestige here on the line. So I am a little bit hopeful that they did secure some basic agreement with the leadership of Hamas that resides at their home in Doha. That the statements of Trump were based not only on some premonition, but on real conversations that took place between the Qatari officials and the leaders of Hamas. We see some indications that, this deal was not rejected immediately, and we do still have some information that, they're considering it in the positive light. But then again, Harry, I think that the most important thing is that devil is always in the details. It's not enough to hear a yes to the general deal. We have to yet to see how is it implemented and who will monitor the implementation of the deal, because there are 10,000 of questions or every of these 20 counts that are included in Trump's deal that he presented yesterday.
So yes, there are risks that it could fall apart as the deal progresses. But even before we get to that point, for Hamas itself, is there any room for them to make some requests to change any of the details that Netanyahu seems to say are now very much set in stone?
Well, they hold the hostages. They still have the bargaining chips, unfortunately. 20 living hostages and also a number of bodies of the hostages that also have to be repatriated back. So until, this is the case, they can put demands. I am absolutely sure that they will put these demands. We've heard yesterday Trump's version of the deal. We've heard Netanyahu's version of the deal that differed from that was presented by President Trump. We will hear, I'm positive, also a version of Hamas with their corrections. It might not be big things, but everything is important here. Every detail counts. It's not set in stone. Nothing is set in stone yet. There is a lot of room for misunderstandings and eventually, yes, for this deal to eventually fall.
And President Trump's ambitions extend far beyond Gaza. He's talking about eternal peace for the region. I mean, obviously, your organization is concerned about the longer-term relationship between Israelis and Palestinians and the wider region. As for Netanyahu, he still remains absolutely committed to there being no Palestinian state. So where do you think this takes us, if anywhere?
Well, I believe that this is a long-term plan, a long-term goal that is yet to be achieved, and it will last long after Netanyahu will leave the office. He will leave the office, and actually we are quite confident that it will happen during the 2026. And the question is what the next leaders of Israel, what will be their position? Because we didn't hear much from them. You know, all of them confirmed that they support the deal. Do they really support the only possible deal, which includes a creation of the Palestinian state? Yes, demilitarized. Yes, the state that will be stable and that eventually will be part, just like Israel, a part of the Middle Eastern dynamics that will be integrated in the Middle East. And not secluded and will not become again like the Gaza Strip, the harbor for terrorism. So this is something that we've yet to hear, here in Israel from the leaders of the opposition. You know, almost none of them spoke about specifically that point. As for Netanyahu, again, he feels that for now there is still room for this kind of game, about like what does this deal actually mean. He tries to convince the Israelis that it doesn't mean what President Trump explicitly said it means. It is a route for the Palestinian independence eventually. Yes, through the transitional government, yes, through the Palestinian Authority, but eventually the goal out there is, of course, stabilization of situation and, yes, the two-state solution.
Ksenia Svetlova, thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us today. Thank you for your time.